Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us today. Welcome to the webinar Holding Sacred Space, Mental Health and Tools for a Faithful Community, which is the final webinar in the series Holding Sacred Space, Mental Health and Faith. We actually have an emergency that came up, and our speaker is not able to be with us today from NAMI, who was Dawn Brown. And so we will be recording the session with her presentation at another time, and then we'll be sending it to you when available and by email. I am so sorry that we're not able to provide this last webinar live as scheduled, but emergencies do happen, and thank you so much for your grace and understanding. But before we kind of conclude, I'm going to ask Reverend Kendall McBroom, who is the Director of Civil and Human Rights, to kind of share with us the legislative asks that we want to highlight for you today. So thanks so much, Kendall.
All right, thank you, Amy. And again, just to reiterate, we sincerely apologize, but we'll do our best to get that video over to you. So I want to highlight 3 of the action alerts that we are currently focusing on and working on. The first would be the Better Mental Health Care Act for Americans, or Healthcare for Americans Act. That is a bill in the Senate. It's Senate Bill 923. That provides access and equitable access in places that individuals, particularly children, are in, such as schools and after school care places. That bill is in the Senate, and it is a bill that Church and Society has supported in the past. The next is the Community Mental Wellness and Resilience Act of 2023. HR 3073, and what you can do is use your phone, scan your camera over the QR code, and it'll take you to our page where you'll see our page and action alert page where you'll see these action alerts. This is also about providing resources to the community and partnering with the community to provide equitable resources for those dealing with or living with mental health illnesses. And then the last is improving coordination and access to resources equitably for Youth Act. That is Senate Bill 2556. Again, that is a bill in which youth would be able to access the resources needed to live the life and have the well-being that they deserve in this country. As we know, mental health has taken a pretty significant place and stage in our public life. There are many webinars that talk about it, many conferences and things of that nature. And this webinar in particular was going to be on mental health and faithful community and how the faith community engages. And one of the things, not to speak too long on it, but one of the things that comes to mind for me as an individual who has, seen and lived and interacted and even served people with mental health challenges and mental health illnesses. The scripture that comes to me is that Psalm 34, I believe it is, Psalm 34, verse 18, that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. And that's not an escape from what we're going through. That's not an escape of the reality that many people live with who have mental health illnesses. But it's an acknowledgement that as we seek the resources, as we receive the resources, as we receive the plethora of things that are available to us, that God and the faith community is walking with us. And so there are many ways that our churches can journey with individuals with mental illness, can be a support system, because this is what we understand and have understood Jesus to do in our life, to walk with us during our darkest days and during our most difficult moments, but also gives us strength to persevere. The faith community can do those things. So we look forward to the pre-recorded session and that being sent over to you. And again, please take time to go to our website, to complete the action alerts, and voice your concerns and voice your support for these bills taking place and being legislated in our nation. Turn it back over to you, Amy.
Thanks so much, Kendall. Actually, while you were speaking, our presenter actually was able to join us, so she is here. So we're so glad that Dawn is able to join us today. So we're just going to continue as scheduled for today, and thank you so much for staying on. And we are really truly live going forward with this. Again, my name is Amy Hong, and I serve as a Senior Executive Director of Education and Engagement at the General Board of Church and Society in Washington, D.C. For participants who are blind or low vision, or perhaps only listening, I am a Korean American woman with long black hair tied back, wearing a yellow shirt under a gray cardigan. Thank you so much to my colleague, Reverend Kendall McBroom, for sharing the legislative asks that we are sharing with you all for this week. After the presentation, there will be a short time of Q&A, and then we will be able to wrap up the webinar then. I am really happy to introduce you to our speaker for today. Dawn Brown is the Director of Cross-Cultural Innovation and Engagement Hub for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Dawn leads a diverse team focused on expanding mental health education and suicide prevention into underrepresented, underserved, and faith communities. The implementation of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, culturally, linguistically appropriate services, principles, and practices, and addressing care navigation and crisis mitigation in partnership with Janssen Neuroscience for the Black African Ancestry Community through the Community Health Equity Alliance Initiative. She also works across the agency and NAMI's 650 plus affiliates in 49 states. Dawn is a mental health advocate, a DEI trainer, and an international speaker on a mission to eradicate disparities and create mental health-friendly, stigma-free places of work, worship, and community. In addition to Dawn's role with NAMI, she is the mother of a daughter with serious mental illness, a Diamond Life member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and a member of the Suicide Prevention Hope Task Force for the city of Milpitas in California. And she lives in Northern California. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dawn.
Thank you for having me. And I apologize. I'm actually at a conference and the Wi-Fi was a bit iffy. I can't thank you enough for just having this conversation on faith and mental health. We are really, really passionate about it. For those of you who don't know about NAMI, NAMI is the largest grassroots agency in the country. We are focused on making sure that folks have access to resources, and we provide education classes. And all of the information that we provide, all the signature programs that we provide are free of charge to individuals in need. So I am grateful to Amy and Pastor McBroom for allowing me to be here. For those who are blind or low vision, I am a woman who identifies as African American. I am wearing rose-colored glasses, a red head wrap, a white blazer over a black top. And one of the things that we really want to make sure that we are doing here at NAMI is being inclusive and making sure that we are thoughtful and of folks who are in need of services. So let me first say it is a blessing to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about our FaithNet initiative. Our department, the cross-cultural innovation and engagement team, we are a small but mighty team that is focused on ensuring that we are out in the community and we are raising awareness and creating sacred spaces, which is, I love this topic because that is something that we do. We do it through what we call our community conversation series. So it's a series of 3 community conversations that we really want to make sure that we hold these healing spaces, because we know that 1 in 5 individuals, in a given year has a mental health crisis. And we know that that doesn't exclude pastors and faith leaders or the communities that they serve. And since COVID, what we do know is that depression and anxiety has increased 44% and 50% respectively. And it's a lot. and it's a lot to hold, and it's a lot for the communities, and it can feel overwhelming. It can feel very top down. And so one of the things that we had started prior to just expanding our FaithNet initiative is that we wanted to make sure that we were intentional about sitting with communities specifically and the faith leaders in those communities. So we serve through our Sharing Hope community conversation series, the Black African Ancestry, Hispanic Latin American, the AA NHPI, the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Island community. Oh, I saw the chat, so my apologies. But the AA NHPI, and currently we are launching what we call Maniwala. And can y'all hear me? I could put in a headset if it is difficult for you all to hear me. Let me know that, and I can put earbuds in my ear. Maybe I'll do that. Just 1 second. Let me see if I can make this a little easier so you all can hear. Give me 1 second. And thank you for your patience. I think someone said move closer to the mic. So let me see if this provides any relief. Hold on 1 second. Let me know if you can hear me better. Let me turn this up. Yep, in my headphones. Let me see if that. So let me know if you cannot hear this, and I will try to figure something else out. And it'll probably knock against my earrings, so bear with me. I don't want you all to hear the knockings. Oh, you cannot hear me. Oh, you cannot. Okay. Oh, hold on 1 second. Let me take those out. Maybe they're not working. Can you hear me now? Oh, you can hear. Oh, okay. So note to self, maybe those I need to get some new. I might be. I could probably talk up. I could talk a little louder. So let me try to do that. Let me project my voice a little better so you all can hear me. But what we do, so our organization very much committed to the way that we serve. When I'm closer, I think it is helpful. I'm just reading all the comments, so I just want to make sure that I am responsive to the way that it is so that you all can hear me. But I'll start again. Our community conversation series is really focused on providing mental health education and really talk about how do we hold these spaces in faith communities, sacred healing spaces in faith communities in a variety of different demographics. So we're in, like I said, Black African Ancestry, Hispanic Latin American, Filipino, South Asian, and we will soon be launching our initiative of community conversations with Alaska Native and or American Indian communities. And the focus really is to make sure that we are equipping not just the community, but the faith leaders in the community. A couple weeks ago, I was at the AME 5th District Conference talking about how we hold spaces for ourselves. And part of what we do is go into faith communities to make sure that we are also in alignment of the strategic plan to develop a mental health friendly, trauma-informed congregation or faith community, but also that we are creating spaces for pastors and faith leaders to have an outlet for them to be able to get connected to the appropriate resources. So our FaithNet initiative is specifically designed to make sure that we are serving our servants, that we are serving our frontline workers, that we are serving our pastors and faith leaders, that we are coming in and creating spaces. So when I was speaking at the conference, we opened up and we started with breath work. So we started with taking the opportunity to hold space for ourselves. How do we create these spaces of spiritual connection that allow us to just get grounded in our presence? And I think that is something that we want to make sure that we are connecting with. And so the topic for the 5th District AME conference was really around radical self-care. And so when we come into spaces similar to this, when we're talking about creating sacred spaces or healing spaces, we always want to ground it in breath work. We want to ground it in ways that could help folks learn about ways to control some of the what we call stinking thinking, right? Which is some of the negative thoughts that are part of our daily experience. And I think it's also important too that when we think about holding these spaces, we think about what are ways in different communities that could be helpful to teach around, sleep hygiene. How do we get enough sleep? How do we create spaces for ourselves in our own, when we leave the church, when we leave the faith community, when we leave the mosque, or when we leave the temple, what are things that we can do? Because what we do know is that there is a need for pastors and faith leaders to be better equipped. And we do that. We try to do that by making sure that there is access. So with the 600, almost 700 affiliates, we want to make sure that they are connecting with faith communities, that we are creating these opportunities to provide the resources that are needed and necessary, that we start to talk about things like cognitive behavioral therapy, or ways that we can do opposite action, or think about how we handle mental health, because it really is at a critical stage just nationally. And one of the things that we always want to make sure that we are doing is providing opportunities for education and resource. So every year, we just started last year in 2022, and we did it again this year in 2023. And that is to offer what we call Pathways to Hope. And Pathways to Hope is a conference, and it allows us to partner with our local affiliates and to be able to create spaces where pastors and faith leaders can come together with the community to learn about how do we think and talk about mental health for pastors and faith leaders. How do we do it for the community? And we engage all of the stakeholders to create, competent care teams and culturally centered care programs and teams, and making sure that as pastors go out and faith leaders go out into spaces of support, they're aware of the resources that are available to them. The Black Psychiatrists Association, or the Black pharmacists that are interested, or pharmacists in general. They don't necessarily have to just be the Black African ancestry pharmacists, but pharmacists are also a very critical element when we think about care navigation, and we think about grounding ourselves in strategies for wellness. And what does that look like on a daily basis? How do we do that? How do we support individuals who might have a serious mental illness? We've partnered with Janssen Neuroscience to create an initiative that we call CHIA, the Community Health Equity Alliance, with a specific focus on Black African ancestry. But the focus is really on what does it look like when we're talking about care navigation for individuals and their support networks, of which pastors and faith leaders and faith teams are part of, in their care, care team. So it focuses on crisis mitigation. What does that look like? Everybody can call 988, but is 988 effective? And is it providing the best resource? And if not, how can we, make sure that we are part of that experience? The other initiative is crisis mitigation. And then, so when we think about how, when people come into crisis, there are things that, we can empower the communities to be aware about. So whether it's adult mental health first aid or youth mental health first aid, or QPR, which can be done online, I'll have to get back to you because I'm tongue twisted right now. But QPR is a suicide prevention resource that individuals can do online, that really just helps to understand how to be a support system when somebody is experiencing suicide ideation. And we want to make sure that pastors and faith leaders and faith communities are aware themselves on what the language is for themselves and their families, but also for the communities that they support. So when we think about, just creating sacred spaces and safe spaces and healing spaces, we think about resources, we think about education, we think about awareness. What are the ways that we can make sure that those are elements on a daily on a daily level for individuals who are coming in and through, whether they're leading or they're coming in through the congregations and communities, to be able to have access, and what can that look like? And I think, although we have classes and signature programs for families called family to family, for peers, peer to peer, we have education for providers. We always want to get back to, what does it mean to be well? What does that look like? Because wellness is a continuum. Yes, question, persuade, refer. Thank you, Donna. I was like, what? I can't remember what it was right now. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Question, persuade, refer. That is a great resource to be able to just start the conversation. Thank you, Donna. Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here as my fellow NAMI member. And it is something that we really, really want to make sure folks are aware. I should tell you too, my journey to this, I would say, commitment to educating pastors and faith leaders came out of my own experience. I have a daughter with an SMI, and when she wasn't doing well initially, I went to our pastor and I said, Pastor, what is happening? I need some help, Lord. And, the pastor was amazing and offered some great strategies, but he also wasn't very informed around mental health education and awareness. So at the time, I got holy oil, and I got a book on casting out demons. Very ill-equipped. This is early on in my journey, very ill-equipped on the casting out demons part. I felt pretty confident on the holy oil. And, I remember reading the book, and I remember also, putting that holy oil everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean hair grease, baby oil, bath water. I was like, we're just gonna like anoint her in this holy oil. But it really didn't necessarily, it wasn't as effective, because although faith is a protective factor, there are other elements of support that are often needed. And so when we think about how we create our healing spaces, part of it is, what is, from a medical perspective, because mental illness is a medical condition, what are some of the things that would be helpful? And so I remember when she started rapid cycling. Rapid cycling means you get out of the hospital for a little bit and you're back in the hospital, out in. And we were going on, there were so many hospitalizations that we were having this conversation, dialogue around conservatorship, because she just couldn't seem to stay out of the hospital at that time. And I remember going back to the pastor and saying, and right about the end, right about this, the time that they were, considering conservatorship, she got a diagnosis. And I remember going back to the pastor and said, you know what? It's a diagnosis. It's this. And I remember he was like, oh, I wasn't aware, I need to learn a little bit more. And so I joined NAMI as a way to just learn more about, I joined the Fame of the Family, and I joined it as a way to learn more about how NAMI was supporting the families. And it was a life raft for me. I think it was amazing. And what I realized is that we just didn't have enough information for our pastors and faith leaders. And I wanted families like mine to not feel hesitant going into the church, into the tabernacle, for us to be able to go in freely and to be able to feel accepted. And I remember my daughter, we had switched churches because we just couldn't get resolution at this church. We went to another church of where I gave my tithes and, and offerings. But at the second church, the pastor was more educated and talked a lot. He gave sermons on wellness and mental health and all of those things. And he talked about his own journey through mental health. And I remember my daughter had come one day, and after coming to the service, she hadn't been hospitalized for like 2 years. She came, and it was just a different experience. And I remember asking her, what's different about this church that yeah, we were in an AME church. This was it was Pentecostal. I was like, what do you think is different? And she said, what's different about it is mental health seems very normal here. So I don't feel ashamed and I feel like I could just be myself. And I think I want to learn more about God. I want to learn more about how God can help me through this process. And the pastor would, when she would be inpatient, when she was inpatient, when she was just joining, he would go visit her in the behavioral health facility and talk to her and listen to her ideas and her dreams. And he would inspire and encourage. He'd go with his wife, Pastor Penny, and it was amazing to watch the evolution of my daughter. And now she is in school. She's getting her bachelor's. She lives on her own. She is very much a part of her own care team and process. So she has a team of folks that kind of keep her grounded. And whenever she's not doing well, she'll say, you know what? I put on my gospel music or my fellowship, or I called the pastor and said, pray for me. It's gonna be okay. I'm gonna call my psychiatrist, I'm gonna call this person, but pray that all goes well because I think I need that too. And so I think for her, she started looking at her whole life as a full as a full engagement. Like, how do I engage not just my wellness, but how do I also include my spirituality? And that's what we want to do, is let people know that we are spiritual beings and having a human experience. And when it comes to mental health, how do we destigmatize that so our children, our partners, our members can feel comfortable creating those safe spaces, and whatever that looks like for them, however they ground it, because prayer alone isn't enough. It requires, in some instances, in many instances, a combination of strategies. And that's really where we were, focused. And that's where NAMI is focused when we talk about holding these spaces. So I'm going to pause because I feel like I've been rambling and talking for quite some time. And if y'all have questions for me, I'd like to answer those. But I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of how we are engaging and creating these sacred healing spaces. And we try to do it one community at a time. And we've had quite a bit of success in doing that. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
So much, Dawn, for speaking to us about all of the ways that you are doing this great work and the way that NAMI is also being such an important tool in getting to these spaces. And so thank you so much. Please continue to drop any questions. I do have a question for you. And you kind of already mentioned it already in the way that you've been sharing, but what are some other ways that faith communities can further break the stigma? I really like the way that your daughter phrased it as mental health is normalized here. What other ways can we go about doing that within our circles?
That's a great question. I think the more that we can talk about mental health, I think one of the things that the pastor was doing, and that we started doing at the local affiliate before I came up to national, and that is encouraging pastors and faith leaders to preach a sermon where you include the conversation around mental health. Invite a local NAMI affiliate to come in and share their story, do a sharing hope community conversation, because the sharing hope community conversations are these sacred spaces, and they're done in a series of 3. So there's a video series you get to watch, you get to have a dialogue around how different communities talk about faith or talk about mental health. And then the second conversation, we invite a mental health professional to talk about things that might be on the minds of individuals when they think about mental health. And it's a very relaxed conversation. And then the third conversation is really around tools and strategies. So we have overviews and we have flyers and we have materials, but oftentimes pastors in the work that we've done the last year, we're saying, don't just drop off materials, because I'm left to answer the questions and I don't always have the answers to those questions. So how do we get folks to come in and be able to offer, and contacting a local NAMI affiliate to say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about your FaithNet outreach efforts, or learn about the services that you are able to do. The community conversations are done based on each community. So it's not a one size fits all. It really is around how do you reach out to the community in ways that they can relate. It's more from a maybe a wisdom culturally centered approach in all of the work that we do. So definitely, if there's an opportunity to preach a mental health sermon, if there's opportunity to have a representative come and talk about NAMI, to start the conversation, that we have in our own voice presentations, there are support groups that folks can join. We have a provider education for pastors and faith leaders. And sharing hope can be both for faith leaders, and it can also be for the community. We found that to be very, very successful. There's a big demand for the community conversation.
Great, thank you so much. And I've noticed that you were also answering some of the questions that were coming up via the chat as well. So thank you for answering those questions. We've been talking a lot about how clergy can offer support to their congregations. What are ways that we know, and you mentioned it as well, that clergy also are struggling with mental health, and that it's sometimes not as accepted to talk about it from a clergy perspective, and that it might not be accepted by the congregation. What are some ways that the congregation can also be supportive of clergy struggling?
That's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. We say that when we're out in the community all the time, that we need to pray for our leadership, because leaders are struggling too. 1 in 5 doesn't exclude governors or pastors or police chiefs. It's the same. It's still 1 in 5 individuals are experiencing a mental health crisis. And so I think asking our faith leaders how they're doing, how are they really, really doing, and being okay praying for them as well. We are also creating I would say communities of support intended specifically for faith leaders that we want to start to get out in the next, I'm going to say by the beginning of 2024. And that is really specific for faith leaders, because what we have found is that faith leaders don't feel comfortable coming in front of their congregations and faith communities to say, I'm struggling with my mental health, until they actually are at peace with the conversation internally, meaning with themselves. It's sometimes a very difficult, it's difficult, I think, for a lot of folks, because they feel like maybe, as a leader, I shouldn't experience this, or I prayed enough, or maybe I'm not as, I shouldn't be in this role, or they may not get the support. But making sure that we encourage communities to pray for pastors and faith leaders, and also to create spaces and referral services specifically for pastors and faith leaders that they can actually access, because that's also an issue that we have faced with pastors and faith leaders, where they go to seek counsel, but the person isn't maybe they're not spiritual, they're not rooted in religion, or they don't feel comfortable. And so pastors and faith leaders have shared that they've gone to see individuals and they haven't felt like they can be completely transparent. So there's a Dr. Renaya Awad, who's a psychiatrist at Stanford. We are partnering with her in her lab too to do just faith-based education. She's actually an imam, so she's a Muslim faith leader, but she partners with pastors and faith leaders around the country. Pastor Veron Blue out of Texas. So we're partnering with other pastors who are creating healing spaces for pastors and faith leaders to make sure that they can get the support that they need.
Thank you. And I think there was a request for you to write the names of those that you mentioned into the chat for reference and resource. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
If there are any other questions, go ahead and post them. And seems like you might have already answered all of the questions. Thank you so much for being with us today, especially with the craziness of tech, and which also happened during this webinar as well. We try our best, but sometimes technology gets the best of us sometimes. So thank you so much, Don, for being here. A sincere thank you for being here. And as we kind of wrap up our webinar, just want to also say thank you to Kendall and for Taomi for being with us throughout this journey of this webinar series. So today's webinar is the conclusion of the webinar series that we've been having. And so thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you have found this webinar series to be helpful for you, to your congregation, and also to your community to promote mental health and wholeness. As we continue to offer educational opportunities like this, your feedback is really important to us. So please fill out this short survey. And let us know your thoughts on the webinar series. The link to the survey, the webinar, and other resources will be emailed to you by the end of this week. Thank you again for joining us, and be well. Have a great day.